But anyways, so yeah, man, excited for us to catch up. It's funny, we were just talking offline a little bit that you moved to the area and then we were having some fun, but you're trying to imitate my American flag in the background.
I know,
But
right?
yeah, I'm excited for us to just kind of chop it up, have a random conversation here, catching up and everything. So
Yeah,
and
man.
we were just talking about being in groups and getting connections. So tell me about that. Now we're kind of up to speed.
I mean, I think business, man, is so crazy. Like, I can't remember who said the quote, but basically, like, the goal, I think it was Alex Hormozy who says, like, the goal in business is to be in business. And, like, the longer you stay in business, the luckier you get. But it's funny because, like, just the networks you have really, I think, are the goal that can make you succeed, because random things things that seem random aren't actually random. Like, whatever you're doing, like, there is that compounding effect. And it's things that you don't even think are going to be good. Like, for example, when I started the business, and this is why I think content is so important, because I'm going to loop this around. But when I first started the business, I really figured out Home Advisor. Like, when I was first getting started, that was like the first lead source that I was making like money on in the company.
Mhm.
And so I made a YouTube video about it, and it didn't really get a ton of traction, to be honest. I think, the actual video itself maybe got like a total of 110 views, and I remember posting around whatever. But then, when we met, I was in APEC, which was, a networking group. Well, I guess it was like a coaching networking group. And then I was in all these other like, sales groups, and, we made these connections that, really at the time, were great to have, but nothing super substantial came from it. Just some good friends and good relationships that have been built over time. But, fast forward 2 years, one of the other guys that I met in Apex and these other groups, he hit me up and was like, hey man, this private equity guy is buying up water treatment companies. And I guess he bought one in the Midwest. He's like, hey, I see you're doing really good, because I'm posting on content all the time.
Mhm.
He's like, hey, it looks like you're crushing it. I'd love to connect you guys. What's hilarious is what's so funny about content is it definitely makes you look bigger than you really are.
Yeah.
Because I guess from the outside it probably looks good, but I know internally, like, I always am just like losing my mind, right? It always feels like everything's burning. But anyway, so he's doing this thing, and we start talking. He's asking for just advice on how to build a business, because that company's obviously not doing anything right. So I gave him my playbooks. Really made me look even better and adds more value. I was like, hey man, here's a video I made on how you can just crush it on Home Advisor, like as a resource ready to go. So, now because of that, there's a lot more trust built up, and now we're in talks of, potential exits and roll-ups and things like that, which I think are incredibly important. Because even, this is the one thing I learned from, again, I love Alex Hormozy, so I'll reference him all the time. So, because if you're new to business, guys, you don't got a lot of money, I'm telling you, that guy is a great business to learn from, because that content is amazing. But every business should be built to be sold, even if you don't want to sell it. So what I'm excited about is, this guy has obviously seen the value I can provide. I have a very unique skill set in sales training and building sales teams, which I think we're going to leverage, which is amazing. So now I'll be able to get an, evaluation on the business, see kind of how these investors are thinking about buying businesses, and then we might do a roll up. And, that could mean in the next couple of years, there could be a very substantial exit. And I can tell you, none of that stuff would have been even close to the value I'd probably get if I didn't build the value before of, just consistently putting out content, recording the process, just putting things out there, even though compared to like all these big influencers out there, no one's seeing my stuff, right? Yeah. I think, okay, my TikTok was a different story, but that was a bunch of college kids, right? So, but it's, even though like the view count and like what you would want to see when you put out content, like everyone wants to blow up and get big, because obviously there's like outsized returns with having a brand like that. This still helps, and by just networking with the right people and putting out value, like, you're going to be top of mind whenever opportunities do come. And I think that's the real thing that I have found now from social media and content is you may not be getting deals coming from it every day. You're putting yourself in people's feeds. You're putting yourself top of mind. So if people really want to, recommend you or move forward, you're gonna be the person they send you to. So
Yeah.
that was a big lesson. And now like I have these opportunities that are coming, and even if nothing substantially comes from these meetings, I'll at least know where my business is valued, how to build it even more, things that they're looking for from their investment thesis. That's huge, because like I said, I can tell you, I want to get wealthy as a business owner. And so I know that if I can get a good offer on a business and one, take care of myself, and then everyone that's been with me and riding with me, if I can make sure they're taken care of as well, then I think it's a win-win for everybody. And then you can, use that to build something new and go with the next thing. And who knows, man, it's exciting stuff coming on year two. And we got Donnie Trump back, so that's going to help small business as well, I think. And so I think this year there's a lot of opportunity. I think a lot of these types of opportunities are going to be more prevalent as well, because I think more people are going to be willing to invest because they know the current administration is going to be more favorable towards businesses. So I think that's
man. I agree with you 100% there. And I've seen that for myself. Obviously, we've been able to stay connected thanks to getting connected through Apex and just really keeping up with each other, having the podcast, which gave us a
Yeah.
reason just to hop on and have a conversation that we could record some content and really just, kick it around. I mean, we just found out that you're in the same area as me now. So we're like, why are we virtual? But, we didn't know that.
I
But that's
know.
all right. So we're already going to make some connections there for you, which will help you out. And of course, it'll come back and serve me as well, because through that law of reciprocity, it's going to come around. But actually, you talk about the content creation. There was two good examples I've gotten recently. One, because of my podcast, which hasn't gotten hundreds of thousands of downloads. It's maybe, the top I think I've had is probably about, or averaging about 80 downloads a week or something like that, which isn't terrible, but it's not amazing either. But from doing the podcast and actually being on other podcasts as well, so going out and creating that content, I actually have about $2,500 of monthly recurring revenue.
Nice.
Just because of doing that, even though it's a seemingly thing that is pointless, it's just a hobby, things like that, it still has turned into something great. Built a great relationship with you, built great relationships with others. But then also I had posted on social media just talking about how I delegated payroll to one of my virtual assistants, and the guy never liked it, never commented on it. We hadn't talked in like a couple months at least, and the business is pretty new for me. And he actually reached out like, hey, we need to talk. I saw your post, or well, when we got on the call, he told me he saw the post, and he's like, that's what made me want to reach out. And again, never liked it, never commented on it. That post didn't go viral. He just happened to see it, and he decided to book a call. Like, even on there, I didn't have a link to like, hey, here's how you go book a call. Nothing like that. It was a small call to action, but he just went and booked a call. He went on my website. I'm guessing that's how he found it, but went on my website, I'm sure, but found the booking link, booked himself, and then we had a conversation like 2 days later and everything, all because I posted on social media. And that doesn't happen for me either all the time, but it's one of those things. You continue to do it, you give those opportunities for people to be able to see you, build up that know, like, and trust, and eventually they're going to be like, all right, I'm going to go work with Justin. I'm going to go work with Philip because seeing them. And I get the same thing where people are like, man, dude, looks like you're crushing it. I'm like, it's doing all right.
All right, yeah.
I'm a little bit more optimistic about, I want to be like, today sucked. But, I'm real about it too. Like, things just aren't, they're not, there's a lot of momentum going on right now. A lot of people are interested, but it's like, but I need a few months, or, this thing, or there's just some objections that I'm having to overcome, or it's just not the right time for people. And I'm not one of those pushy salespeople that, that are going to say, well, you're the assistant if you don't have an assistant and all this stuff. Like, no, they'll come around, whoever it is that I'm trying to work with, and we'll just keep following up. And like you said, keep being in business, and you're going to get lucky, you're going to get fortunate, and eventually it's going to happen. I mean, that's why they call it the FU money, the follow-up money, right? And that's where the wealth generation comes, is being willing to follow up and everything.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, man. And it's interesting because I like the fact we're like, oh, it looks like everything's going so well. And if you think about it, if you were to look at your own business from like a purely like you're not working in it view, like if you're looking from the outside, you'd probably say the same thing. Because I mean, I like to use my business as an example. I mean, every day I wake up, I feel like everything is on fire. But then if I look at the totality of the business, I mean, 2 years in, we've already done over $1 million in revenue, right? And now we're winning bigger contracts. It's just, I think that's just the nature of like when you actually care about it. There's always gonna be problems in a business because we're growing, especially for us. Like, we have so many things that we need to get better now. As our team has grown, like, I need operations like crazy, which is why we've been talking about a virtual assistant, because it's very apparent that that's my next step that I need. And talk about virtual assistants, I've had so many bad ones. It's been crazy. So finding like that good relationship is super important, which we might actually be able to talk about that after this podcast. We got some more cash flowing, which is nice.
All right.
But yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, it always feels like it's burdened when you're in it. But if you look on the outside, it's like, well, the business is still standing, it's still moving forward. And I think part of that might be either you just want it to grow too fast, or, you just have people stressed. Like, that's, I think what I've noticed is everyone, when you have more people, you have more problems, because everyone has their own things that are important to them. And what I've tried to learn, and this is I have more grace. I remember when I was a sales guy, I used to especially when I was a top sales guy, I had like that top sales guy ego that came with it at the time. And I remember being like so judgmental of the business I was with at the time. Like, why is the owner's not doing this? All this crap. And now that I'm an owner, it is so funny when you see how all the pieces of the business go together and work. And then whenever someone comes up to you with a complaint that is just so minor, or is like so insignificant, or they're not doing something, but it makes such a big impact. Like, biggest thing, updating a fucking CRM and putting the right details in there so I can have accurate data. Like, trying to get sales guys to update their CRMs, and then when they give you some complaints and you not want to just lose your mind, part of it, right? That
Yeah.
kind of stress, not having, like the VA thing, right? Not having someone that can just take phone calls throughout the day. Because, when you're the secretary and the lead, the appointment setter and the business owner, and you're doing, and you're the CFO, your time gets stretched like crazy. So
Yeah.
it just ends up being a nightmare. But that's part of the stress of starting a business. And if it was easy,
It is.
everyone would do
That's
it.
where you get the people in place, and then eventually you look like that business owner is just kicking their feet up. They're not doing anything, and they're making all this money. But all this time beforehand, you weren't making hardly anything. I was talking with somebody as well. We're cusping on 6 figures gross and everything, but I'm not making anywhere near 6 figures right now with the team and everything. Of course, I'm using virtual assistants as well to kind of show proof in the pudding kind of thing, which helps as well because I can have more team members than if I had people in the States. But still, even with that, I'm paying all these people, but I did front load a little bit. I probably could have a little bit less people on the team if I really wanted to, but I realized I want to play to where I'm trying to go, not to where I'm at today and everything. So I added in some extra people, and one that I especially did that with was my HR and recruiting gal, and eventually she'll just be full HR and we'll get a recruiter in. But I didn't necessarily need just a full HR or a full recruiter. I didn't necessarily need either one. I'm finding out that she's doing a lot of things I didn't realize. Like, oh, this is really beneficial. It's helpful. And like, I delegated payroll to her actually that I didn't know if I would do that or not. But I put people in place, so I'm making less money on the business because of that, even though we're 5 months in and I'm already at almost 6 figures, which is awesome. But I'm not making anywhere near that. I'm making like 10K a year right now, unless if we got to get more clients in. But right now I'm only like making like 10K. And so it's like, okay. And the stresses of that, like, man, okay, all this money comes in, but then almost all of it goes back out. And you're trying to manage all these people that are doing different things, and you're trying to stay on top of them. It's like, okay, you're doing social media, you're doing HR and recruiting, you're doing video editing. You're over here, social media engagement, all this. Okay, how's this working together? I've got a lead gen person as well, and just like got to check on them, see how things are going. Okay, are you updating things? What do you need help with? And really try to check in with them and make sure you're staying proactive on top of it, because you've got to have a pulse on the business, especially as the business owner. You can't just pull yourself out. And too many times, and I was there as well, like as just the engineer in a 9 to 5, where I was like, man, this sucks. Like these executives, these higher ups, like they just sit there and they go to a meeting and they tell people to do stuff, and like that's it. And as I moved into project management role, I saw a lot of that difference, and it's helped out a lot, because like managing a project to me is very similar to business ownership. Obviously, you're just managing a project, you're not managing a whole business. But you have to realize that you have to guide the business. You're really leading that business, or that project in this case. You're employing people to go do the actual work. Even though you could do it yourself, you're still having to deploy people to actually go do that work. And it's a weird feeling at first, because, like with business, hey, I need you to do this on social media. Sure, I could go post every day at 7 and 12, but I've got somebody else doing that now, and I got to keep telling them to do that, and then think about the strategy and this, that, and the other. Although I can do that, it's a difficult thing. And now having that title as the owner, the CEO, it makes it a little bit easier than like in a project management role. But that's something I've noticed, like going, being in a project management role and everything as well, that it's not about doing that work yourself. You're not going to go far at all if you do it yourself. So you really have to start to delegate that work, but then you have to go check in on that too. You can't just send it out there in the ether and then hope it gets done. You still have to check on that. And you start to figure out over time who are the high performers, who are the ones that you can truly rely on. And, you check in less and less, but you still have to be there. You have to encourage them as well. You're being this cheerleader, but then you're being their boss and telling them what to do, and you're giving the vision. And I mean, there's just so many things that go into it. And that's one of the things I've been realizing as well, as we're building up the team and trying to move forward. I have to continue to give that vision to the team. Who are we trying to target? Who are the people we're trying to help? What is our vision? What is our target for the year and everything? And so staying those targets, that we're looking to acquire 50 clients for the year, to have 60 VAs placed, that we are going after small business owners, specifically married men that are in the home service-based industry. Like we're literally getting that dialed in to say, this is our ideal client. So that way, when they're creating content, when they're editing the videos, when they're doing these things, they can think in that light and they can know, what is my part in this?
Yeah.
And that's another thing. You have to make sure your team understands that, because if they don't understand that, it's easy with sales. Okay, we're trying to get 50 clients. So if I'm making sales, I'm helping us get clients, or I'm helping us get to this target revenue. But let's say video editing, what does that have to do with anything? Or what does social media have to do with getting us there? So you have to really tie that in. Look, you are bringing in the awareness, the presence of our business, so we can get there. And so whatever those roles are, like our payroll, okay, well, you're making our employees happy, so they can actually continue to work, because they'll want to continue to work with us. And we'll be a good boss for them, a good place to work. So there's always a fit, but you have to share that. And so you as a business owner have to understand all those roles and be able to explain that to your team. Again, the vision is such a huge thing, and it's not a one-time set it and forget it. And I like to relate it to marriage. If I just told my wife when we got married I loved her and I never said it again, eventually she's going to feel like she's not loved. And it's not just about saying it too. I've got to show it. I've got to express it. It's got to be in my actions. There's different ways that I need to show love for her. It's not just saying the words, I love you. And it's the same thing with our team. You can't just give them the service. You can't just give them a paycheck. You've got to show them that you care about them and that they're here for a purpose, and what the vision of your business is for them to continue to remember that and keep going towards that.
No, man, that's huge, man. Yeah, and like you said, I think that's one of the issues with being the top guy is, especially if it's a bootstrap business and you put your money into it, that's when things get crazy. Because I remember that for me, that's when things felt different, even though it's not. When I was at that solar company, I mean, I helped grow that from, we were doing $600K a year, and in 11 months, I was able to take it to 25 million. But if I look back, one of the reasons why I think that was so easy was because I didn't have any risk involved. I mean, I did, as far as I wasn't making as much money at first, but when things started rolling, I started making big commission checks. So after 3 or 4 months, I had a ton of money in the bank. So I was like, oh, I'm good. So then I just focus on the work. As a business owner, at least where I'm at, especially when you bootstrap it, there's a lot of stress because you have to do everything you just said, right? Manage all this stuff, be energetic, as well as freaking out because you don't know, you have to manage the money, and you're hoping, if your people don't perform, you don't get paid, right? If your people don't do their job, especially in a sales organization, nothing comes in. So, it can be very, very mentally taxing for sure. And I think that's what levels it up as the owner, because you also, even though you have that extra stress, you can't just lose it on everybody, right? You still gotta build them up and motivate them. And that's, I think, the hardest thing. And that's where I know for me, there's just days where I just have to tune out, because you have all that stuff. You're trying to manage the bank account. You're trying to do everything. But once you can, get to a point in a business where you can afford to fill all the roles where you're not having to be in the weeds, I think that's when a real business can really scale, because then you can actually take the time to take a big look at your company as a whole and say, okay, what are my numbers? How are we doing on marketing? Okay, what are some cool things that we can do? What are because that's what the owner should do, the vision, right? All right, I have a vision. I think this is how we're going to push the business forward. Let's do it. I say, pull the trigger, let's go. And then you can actually move the business forward. But it's hard to do that when, you're taking phone calls every day, or just still dealing with stuff that an admin should be doing, because it takes a lot of time. I put a video out on Instagram, what was it, a month ago? And it was just one day I just recorded all my phone calls. And I think from 9:30 all the way until 6 p.m., I had a call every 10 minutes.
Man.
So it's it's real difficult for you to sit down and do any deep work if your phone is going off. And especially when you're new in the business, yes, you can't just turn off the work phone, right? Yeah. So,
well, not to mention if you're in the middle of an install, and I know you deal with a lot of pipe and stuff like that, plumbing. So all of a sudden you bust the pipe, and boom, you're wet as can be, but all of a sudden the call's coming in, but you got all this water just leaking out. Hopefully it's not septic, it's just water. But whatever it may be is just spewing out. But now you missed a call, you missed an opportunity. Because you were trying to be everything. And
luckily, I don't have to deal with that, Phil. Yeah. I mean, I have installers that are really good, so that side is fine. That would be horrible.
Yeah, but I mean,
that would be horrible.
I remember seeing those videos when you first were doing it. You were out there doing the installs, and pretty quickly you did get an installer, which makes a lot of sense. Let me get somebody else to at least be there to assist me, so it's not just me. But still, you got to do both or everything at first, unless you just happen to have $1 million to start out and boom, 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 we're going to hire 10 people, all this, and that's great. But when you're bootstrapping it, you are doing
Oh,
everything, and it
it's so
sucks.
tough. It's also tough too because like you can't get the talent that you want either. Like if you think about it, like some top talent will take pay cuts for opportunities, but like
Yeah.
the reality is like there's so many great people that could be a game changer in your business, but like you got to pay to bring them in. They have skill sets that can materially change your company. But when you're bootstrapped, like you don't have the money to pay somebody 80, 90K a year to just do, on the hope that they'll work out, right? So that's just, that's the problem with bootstrapping. You have to either build the talent or you're going to get, worse talent in to start with. And we trust me, I dealt with that. And that's actually one of my biggest mistakes that I made is if there's one thing I could say is I think one thing that cost me the most money was I brought in somebody who had a ton of experience. I worked with them in the past actually. And I'm a sales guy, right? So I didn't know anything on the operations, the back end, stuff like that. That was not my strong suit. And I knew from seeing how the solar company imploded, I was like, okay, I'm not going to make that same mistake on my business. I'm going to make sure my operations is built out. So I brought him on an equity shelf and, hey, you're going to take less, but let's put you on an equity shelf. Help me build this company, give you some skin in the game. Because his skill set, to be honest, was probably that of $170,000, $200,000 a year employee, which I also couldn't afford. So, brought the person in, but unfortunately, I think where they were at in life, it was not the time for a startup. They had other things going on. And so, me not keeping my eye on the pulse and being as firm as I needed to be, I probably lost 30 grand on that.
Yeah.
From them taking stuff out for personal things, the whole thing. Luckily I kept all the equity, but that's just like one of those lessons. Like, I almost rushed and I didn't want, like, the fear of being uncomfortable. I tried to rush someone into a position that I probably didn't even need at that time. And that just caused substantial monetary loss. So I think, being able to be comfortable, not rushing to replace yourself too early, until you learn that side of the business. Cause as an owner, you do need to know everything that's happening in your company. To me, I didn't want to know that stuff. I just wanted to like focus on the sales and the funnel and building the brand, and I didn't want to worry about all the admin stuff. I didn't worry about payroll. I didn't want to worry about all the like legal certifications and all that nonsense and managing the budget. I didn't want to do any of that. So I had him do it. But when you have too much trust in somebody in any part of the business, if you don't keep a pulse on it, like you said earlier, man, you can very quickly get into a tight spot.
Yeah, and I think about like trust but verify. Trust that they're going to do the job, but verify that it's getting done. Do checkups, spot checking things. That's a lot of what I do with my assistants and everything. My team is I go back and check and see how things are, and then I'll try and screenshot and give them examples. Hey, look, you did this. I don't think it was that bad, but like I think we should address it more this way. Or hey, this isn't the right type of person or whatever. But hey, this is more what we're looking for. Just kind of reminders or whatever that may be. And so working through that and everything, just continue to have those conversations and make sure that we're on the same page. But then ask him, hey, is there anything I can do to help you out? What resources do you need? Do you feel like you have too much on your plate? What's going on? And really talking through those things is what I really try and focus on and really trying to develop them. And then also see, is this what you want to continue to do? Like, right now where you're going to have to kind of continue on this path, but how can we bring in something else that you want to do? Let's say they're doing the social media, but they really want to get into sales. Okay, well, how can we help start to convert you over to that sales role instead of just being on the social media marketing side of things? And so really trying to develop them and just have those conversations really, to me, builds that buy-in from them that they're going to want to continue to work with us and everything. And so we're just thinking something about, when you've got somebody that's not working out too well, they always talk about hire slow, fire fast kind of thing. What have you had to experience, firing people? Like what have you done when it came to things like that?
Yeah, end of the year was actually worse. I had to let somebody go, not because they were a bad person, but just because I couldn't afford them. That really sucked because I brought this person on. This person was actually a client of mine. He saw how the business had grown and he wanted to come on, but because we were still trying to recover from some of the other stuff that happened in the business, it was the end of the year, it was getting really slow. And I was just looking at the numbers, meet with my bookkeeper, and I was like, dude, we just can't afford this position, So that's tough. And I think for those, just being really upfront is the best way. The conversation is going to suck anyway, but that's the hardest thing about the business owners. Like you got to keep the business alive. And that's the frame I have in my head is like, I got to be responsible for the business no matter what. Right. And one thing that I don't think I have done well in the past that I've done better is I am definitely way more of someone that wants to like keep putting trust into people and investing in people and like give them the opportunity. But I think you have to never judge someone by the words they say. And for me, that's tough because I always like to believe people on like, hey, I'm gonna do all this stuff. Like, cool. You really got to identify their actions and say, okay, are you actually producing? And I think will make firing easier, because I know the hardest people I've had to fire or let go is when I knew the expectations I wanted, but I didn't quite clearly explain it to them. And so then that becomes a hard conversation, because then I'm like, dude, you're like, you suck. And they're like, well, why do I suck? And you're like, well, you suck because of X, Y, and Z. And they're like, oh, what the hell, blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, I got to let you go because you suck, right? So now what I've done is I bring people on, I set an expectation, especially if they're getting paid any type of like salary type of stuff. Like if you're a 1099, it's not as bad because, you know, at the end of the day, like if you're a 1099 sales guy, you're not generating income. Like I'm not monetarily losing anything. So that's a lot easier. But if I'm paying like any type of like override or salary or anything that's like overhead related, what's helped me out a lot is just setting the expectation of like, hey, you have this amount of time to achieve this result. If that doesn't happen, either we cut the compensation or, you know, we go our separate ways. But whenever I let somebody go, whether I set the right expectation or not, or if let's say just do something terrible, right? Like if I had a couple people who, you know, have done things that could have hurt the business, you know, I think just stating the facts is the best way to do it, right? Those tough conversations are hard, but like you got to have them, because sometimes that person can drain your business, and the longer you keep them there, the worse it is. So I try to keep the emotion out of it. I just say, I'll always just sit them down. I'll always say, listen, number one, I appreciate you even being here in the business. I always want to lead with some sort of gratitude. And I'll be like, listen, you've done X, Y, and Z well, unfortunately. And then I just be very upfront, like list the things that I think they hadn't done well. It's like, this is what you did, this is the result of it, and this is how it's affecting the business. And then as the business owner, I just don't think this is the right time, or I gotta let you go. And funny enough, what I have found, if you do it that way, like there's people who I had to let go, or who voluntarily left, who have still said they'd come back and work here. You know, for example, I had a sales guy where, you know, early on, I put a lot of money into him, like put him in a rental to get him up to a better market so he could start trying and testing out. And at the end of the day, where his sales abilities were and the attention we could give him weren't making sense. Like he had potential, but his skill was too low for the time and energy I could put into it, because we were still very new into the business. So every lead was really important, because we needed the best closer going to the best leads. And then we also needed people generating leads as well. And he wasn't doing the generating part. And when he was actually in homes, the worst part is this type of stuff. When you just have expenses that come out of nowhere, when you're just like, I got to pay for what? It's freaking stupid. So
yeah, and that's unfortunately some stuff you have to start kind of baking in a little bit. It's tough to put that into the budget, because, you know, how much do you really budget? I guess that kind of goes under maintenance, wear and tear, stuff like that. But how much do you really budget on that? And especially as a new business, it's a hard thing. It's easy when you're an established business. You can look back and say, hey, look, we spent $30,000 a year on average the last 3 years. So we probably should budget $30,000 this year for maintenance and repairs and everything. But yeah, you can't know that when you're first starting out. You can try and do a little bit of it, but even then, yeah, you're bootstrapping everything. Every dollar counts. You can't just have this $10,000 or $30,000 or whatever just sitting there for the day that it might happen and everything. It'd be nice if you could, but it's definitely difficult, and something as you get more established you have to get into.
Yeah.
Which actually makes me think as well, when you're first starting out a business, it's obviously just you. So let's say, you know, you only need $10,000 a month to live off of. So, okay, cool. I can charge this price, and as long as I have this many customers, I can get to $10,000 a month. I can live comfortably, no problem.
Yeah.
Well, you start adding employees, and you realize, well, you got, you know, really two options. Either now you got to double your sales or increase the amount of volume, or, and really you probably should do both, is increase your prices. And that's a hard concept to get around. And that's one of the things I think most small businesses struggle with. One, the pricing, but two, that most people don't want to pay that much to a small business, because typically they're having to charge more because of that. And I think a lot of times, like, you know, organic food or, you know, farm to market kind of thing. So the food's a lot more expensive than you go to the local Walmart and you get, you know, who knows where it's from, what country, how genetically modified it is. But the food's more expensive from that farm to market. But it's because that's the only way they can really make that money versus a Walmart. They've got the systems in place. They're super efficient, or, you know, whatever. There's a lot of things. So learning to have your prices increased, or adjusted more for having a team and be able to pay for a team is a difficult thing as well for a small business.
Yeah, it really is. But I mean, that's why like that's probably the first thing you need to dial in is like your numbers, and that's why starting
Yeah.
small is actually better. I do like the idea, you know, especially for sales organizations. One things that we have the benefit of is, you know, most people can operate as a 1099, so you're only paying on performance, which is amazing. But to get to that next level, that's where it gets dicey. Like when you start adding like admins or installers or people that you're paying like on a salary or monthly or whatever, or managers who are getting like maybe a small override to manage the team, right? And if the team doesn't produce, it's like, okay, well, what's going on here? So that's where like setting those clear expectations. Like, well, I need a team to produce if you want to get paid. So
yeah, exactly.
Just reality.
It is. Yeah. It is. Well, man, this has been fun, dude. Cutting it up like this. We're definitely gonna have to do some content in person now that I know you're here locally.
Yeah, we're close. Yeah, the next one will be in person for sure.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Well, Justin, man, appreciate the time as always.
All right, brother.